Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, February 7th. It is 5:28 a.m. Central Time. Grain markets are mixed this morning. Matt Bennett is joining us from the road. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Joe.
Where are you this morning?
Wisconsin Dells at Wisconsin corn and soybean growers.
You going to the water park?
I went yesterday and I had my rear end handed to me by a water slide, so I'm a little sore this morning. But yeah, I brought the kids and we were gonna have fun, but I woke up feeling like I'm 80 years old.
We wish you a speedy recovery.
Yeah.
Let's get to the wheat market, which is our first story.
So, all three classes of exchange traded U.S. wheat futures posted fresh multi month highs overnight. Forecasted cold weather in the Black Sea region, which may cause crop damage, fueled the rise. Short covering by the funds also boosted prices. Corn and soybean futures also finished higher on the day. The grain markets have been supported this week by President Trump temporarily pausing tariffs on Canada and Mexico. The markets also gained support after China responded to Trump's 10% tariffs with only mild counter tariffs that excluded crops.
Okay, so I was told that wheat futures rallied yesterday and then overnight on Black Sea weather fears. So I looked at the Black Sea weather maps. Over the next 7 days, we really don't have much in terms of cold temperatures. As a matter of fact, most of Russia and Ukraine and their wheat areas are going to see above normal temperatures over the next week. It's when you get into the extended period. This is the 8 to 14 day model from our friends at Crop Profit. This is the GFS. You're going to run 7 to 8 degrees below normal in the north and northeastern wheat areas of Russia. And I'd estimate ballpark that's maybe like a third of production. I think this is a big deal, Matt, if there's going to be some additional damage, because we were told that it was too dry to start and that they had problems initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going into dormancy, talks of a massive potential drop in wheat production out of Russia was something that we'd all heard about. So, yeah, I'm totally with you here. If we end up with this kind of weather on top of what we saw going into dormancy, yeah, it's your number one world exporter. We all know that. And so there's no doubt in my mind that this is a game changer. I felt like the wheat market was held back for a while now. I know I've brought it up to you, and I know you've kind of agreed, but I think there's reasons here that you could see quite a bit of excitement in this wheat market.
Okay, here's another reason, and this one was not really reported, but next week in Kansas and really all across U.S. HRW wheat country, you're going to see lows in the single digits. Like I think it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, overnight lows 0, 1 degrees, 2 degrees. Do you think this is part of it?
Well, I mean, there's no snow in half this region we're talking. I mean, you get all kinds of cold weather on top of, where we're at with no snow. It's definitely, in my opinion, it just adds fuel to the fire. So I'm sure that it's got to be part of it. But yeah, I mean, the lack of snow this year to begin with is a story, but especially in wheat country, if you're going to get cold temps.
The wheat market has acted well, as I mentioned. I threw some retracement lines on the March Kansas City chart this morning. You're getting close to the 38% retracement if you make your range from the, I think it would have been the May high to the late November, early December low. So you're closing in on some potential kind of upside targets, I guess. I think it's interesting that 38% retracement kind of lines up with those October highs. You look at the bigger picture chart, the weekly. We're trading above one trend line this morning. The next one's not up until about 719. That's like $1 above the market. Think a move like that's possible?
I do. I actually do. I mean, you've seen these commodities, inflate. There's no doubt that you've seen some buying come in here. I do think a lot of money was on the sidelines. It just kind of continues to flow in. But with the wheat market, you're still restricting world stocks somewhat over the last several years, and so that's a big deal. And so you've got to understand if it's Russia, especially. Now, I mean, a weather problem in the U.S. is one thing. But a weather problem in Russia is a completely different thing. So you add those together, though, and all of a sudden you've got a pretty good story. And I think the wheat market can move pretty rapidly in here, if we continue this story.
Okay, so the world wheat supply and demand situation is projected to be the tightest since the 14-15 marketing year, but that's at the end of this marketing year. And we haven't seen a 25-26 balance sheet from USDA yet. And I would venture to say that given prospects of a lighter Russian crop, lighter Russian exports, you may see an even tighter situation projected for 25-26, which just doesn't line up to me with wheat, in the upper fives or low sixes.
I
Feels
agree
like we
with you.
should probably be a little bit higher.
Yep.
Okay. Corn, I wanted to run through corn and soybeans really quickly here. Corn market's just kind of consolidated for the most part this week. We've seen some back and forth, but we're stuck in the 490s. Does this feel like fair value to you?
For the time being, maybe. I mean, clearly you've had rounds of buying come in here. At the same time, I think a couple, three things are going on. Funds have gotten long. You've talked about this. They could stay long for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have asked me, why are they long? Why do they want to be long? Well, you restrict world stocks on corn as well. Over the course of the last several years, obviously we don't have near as burdensome a balance sheet here in the U.S. So I think funds were looking for cheap commodities to own, and they come in here on corn. What do they want to see? Is the safrinha crop going to get planted? Is it going to get harvested in a timely fashion? What's the U.S. crop look like? Because they understand that if you really cut into world stocks this year and stocks use ratios, then you might have a bit of a story. So I guess in my opinion, I think corn still has a chance it could move higher. But at the same time, if I'd been sitting on a ton of corn, I don't think too many guys are, but if I'd been sitting on a corn and hadn't done anything, I think you almost have to look at rewarding a rally, if you've got too much corn.
Spot corn basis still fairly weak.
It is, and I think it will be for some time. I think it's regionally speaking, you're going to have some differences here and there. But overall, most of the end users we've talked to have phenomenal coverage. I'm not trying to make light of it. I mean, bottom line, you talk to any grower, or trucker, call it whoever it is driving a truck right now, it's 1 to 2 hour lines pretty much anywhere you go. So with their coverage being so good, they just don't have any incentive to bid up for corn. I do think that time will come though, and I think it could get pretty interesting whenever you get, I don't know, into planting season or after. But bottom line for now, I just don't see that they're going to have any incentive for basis to improve.
Soybean market has backed off. We're about 20 cents off of the recent highs, but you've still got an uptrend intact the way that it looks to me. And this is despite the fact that Brazil is now in the process of harvesting this monster crop. It's despite the fact that U.S. soybeans are overvalued to the tune of 90 cents or $1 per bushel versus Brazil on the export market. But the board continues to act pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it has acted good overall. Clearly, you're looking at the focal point, in my opinion, in Argentina. Yes, they're going to have a crop. There's no doubt. I think USDA, it'd be very interesting to see what they come up with on this February report. I mean, in the situation they're in, they were at 52 last month versus 48.2, I believe, a year ago. So already, if you're going to say that Brazil's up 16 million tons, which is I think what the USDA is suggesting, I don't know overall. If you're going to take South America down in totality, you're going to it's just not going to happen, I guess, is one thing I would say. So I do think that's been your focal point, and as well as I do, anytime Argentina gets dry, meal rallies, then beans follow. I do think that's been something the market's been looking at. But at the same time, I think my thought process is overall, you're going to need a pretty steep weather issue to keep the market rolling right along. I mean, I'm more supportive of corn than beans, I guess is the best way to put it.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Trump's trade rep nominee was on the tape yesterday.
He sure was, and he was defending Trump's trade policies. During his confirmation hearing, Jamieson Greer advocated for Trump's tariff policies and promised to reform international trade. He also said that Trump's idea of a universal tariff on all imports should be considered. Greer plans to expand global markets for U.S. farmers and also reduce the U.S. trade deficit. He intends to assess whether China, Mexico, and Canada upheld their trade agreements with the U.S. during Trump's first term. Republican senators largely expressed support for nominating Greer. However, some senators voiced concerns that tariffs could increase input costs for farmers and potentially lead to a trade war.
Mackenzie, people are going to give a shit for using the New York Times article this morning because they were part of that U.S. aid story where like maybe they got a whole bunch of money, maybe they didn't. We just used it. I just used it because they had the best picture of him, and you guys are going to be hearing a lot about this guy as we move forward here. So Jamieson Greer is the trade rep nominee. One thing that he said that was interesting, he said, we will very quickly review China's compliance with the phase 1 trade deal, and we will be prepared to enforce it. I actually think the markets were moving back and forth a little bit as this guy was talking yesterday, because he said some things that were kind of like hawkish and some things that were kind of like, oh no, maybe we could actually sell more imports out of the United States. I don't know, Matt, what are you thinking about the tariff situation right now in general?
I thought that pretty interesting, Joe. Obviously, we talked on Sunday night. There was a lot of uncertainties. I guess my thought was that, you look at Mexico, for instance. I know we'll get to China, but obviously their language towards the whole situation said that they wanted to sit down and talk. Clearly, Canada is talking similarly. I think when it gets into the thing with China, clearly you got phase one, phase two. I don't know. To me, I think that they're going to want to deal maybe a little bit more than they did the last go round. The reason is just the state of their economy. And so I'm not a huge fan of tariffs. I mean, maybe I don't know enough about them. I just know that whenever you start talking tariffs, going on and taking them off are two totally different things. It seems like they don't come off near as easily as they go on. But I mean, as you talk about this guy and you talk about everything he promises to do, he sounds like a miracle worker. So maybe he knows. Maybe he knows a way to get this done. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just we talked about it at length earlier this week. Just the idea floating out there that maybe we push China for another trade deal, which would involve more ag imports, is total. It's a total counter narrative relative to what we talked about for months prior to Trump being inaugurated or even elected. So it's there's a lot of things that could change here. Let's keep going.
Mexico has officially removed restrictions on imports of genetically modified corn. The nation originally attempted to ban GMO corn imports for human, livestock, and industrial uses. However, their most recent policy only restricted imports intended for human consumption. Back in December, a USMCA panel determined that the restrictions were in violation of the USMCA trade agreement. Mexico has been a major importer of U.S. GMO yellow corn, primarily used for livestock feed and industrial purposes. U.S. farmers were concerned that Mexico's policy might expand and ban GMO corn used for animal feed.
I threw this in this morning because I saw it floating around, and I wanted to let you guys know that this is mostly a non-story. This issue with regard to GMO corn for animal feed, which is the vast majority of their imports, it was settled a long time ago. I think, though, that Mexico officially dropped the restrictions is maybe just a step in the right direction with regard to sentiment.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, that's one thing I don't think a lot of folks understood whenever we were talking about this previously, is that their main concern with GMO was food grade type stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they feed a ton of cattle. So we knew that a lot of the corn that was going to be going into Mexico wasn't going to have to worry about this. But yeah, it's probably a non-event. But I think just overall compliance, if you will, with Mexico around this tariff thing looks good. I mean, it looks to me like they want to try to work with us more so than what they have in the past. I mean, clearly we've been a good trade partner. It's just that, with them offering to do things, like officially take this off, offering to put people on the border, to try to stop the flow of fentanyl. I mean, clearly they're trying to work here to make things go a little smoother.
Just watch what they do. I mean, it was yesterday or 2 days ago. We reported a big new crop corn sale out of the U.S. to Mexico, and that's going to be damn near 100% GMO corn. So it's a non-issue.
U.S. corn export sales were strong last week. Net corn sales were near the upper end of pre-report expectations at 58 million bushels. The print was up 9% compared to the previous week and 32% from the prior 4-week average. Mexico was the largest corn buyer for the week. Net soybean sales were reported at 14 million bushels. The print was down 12% from the previous week and 40% from the prior 4-week average. China was the largest soybean buyer for the week. Net wheat sales were reported at 16 million bushels. The print was down 4% from the previous week, but up 41% from the prior 4-week average. Mexico was the largest wheat buyer for the week.
Look at these corn sales, Matt. 1.4, almost 1.5 million. Mexico is the largest buyer again. There had been the whole narrative about front running this, front running that. It just keeps going.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a couple of bad crops in a row, though. Yeah, I mean, they've basically had drought over the last 3 years. So they haven't raised near as much corn as they usually do. Yes, they're always a net importer. But bottom line is their needs are great. And so, yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind when you look at a week like this with exports, what if we do end up making some headway on this Chinese front and they buy corn? I mean, I know people talk maybe a couple cargoes they bought here recently, but what if they actually came in and bought corn like we saw
Could you
back in
imagine?
20 and 21? Well, I mean, it'd be pretty exciting.
It would be, and we're still competitive. We're competitive on the export
Very
market, and we
cheapest.
will be until that second Brazilian crop comes
Yeah.
online, and that's assuming that crop's good.
Yeah,
That's
we're cheapest corn in the world.
That's an assumption. Okay. Soybean sales have backed off, and that's what they typically do this time of year. That's not shocking. Wheat sales have been running about average-ish. Let's look at the drought monitor.
So rainfall was scattered across the Corn Belt last week. Drought conditions improved slightly in western Missouri, eastern Iowa, and northwest Illinois. Conditions worsened over in northwest Indiana. Precipitation was minimal across the high plains. Drought conditions were mostly unchanged, with the exception of a slight improvement in southeast Nebraska. When we look at the percentage of U.S. areas experiencing drought, corn country 46%, soybeans 37%, winter wheat 23%, spring wheat 45%, and cattle country 37%.
Not much in terms of rain here for the Corn Belt on tap for the next 7 days. Southeast part of the country is going to be wet, but aside from that, not much. You go out through the 16-day period, and yeah, some rain for the central and eastern Corn Belt, but not a ton. Matt, do you have concerns about the dry conditions out west in particular or elsewhere?
I mean, a couple of things of note. Most of the growers that I talk to, especially I don't know, I-80 and north, and into the west, say that they're excessively dry this year, as dry as what they've been in quite some time. And I guess in the wintertime, I guess typically I'm not super concerned about that unless you parlay that with like Eric Snodgrass, who was at our conference this last week. I mean, there's no doubt he's concerned. So 60% chance of some sort of drought based on scientific stuff. It's not like he's just throwing numbers out there. And so I think when you see how dry people are, and you see some of the talk coming out of that side of the world, it's concerning. So I mean, it just keeps me to wanting to have a little more flex in my program this year, especially if we take off on a bender higher. I don't want to get too far over my skis.
60%. So you're saying there's a chance. I saw his presentation. It was fantastic.
Excellent.
What did cattle prices do yesterday?
Cattle futures had an ugly day yesterday. Live cattle saw losses ranging from 230 all the way down to 454. Feeders really took a hit. They were down anywhere from 327 all the way down to 547. Box beef was mixed. Choice was down $1.36 at 323.98. Select was up 44 cents at 314.77.
And what was the cause for the collapse yesterday?
There was news that came out about another bird flu strain being detected in dairy cows down in Nevada. And this strain was linked to an individual that was hospitalized and actually eventually died from bird flu last year. And then also, I believe it's the funds are getting out of their long positions is also playing into this situation. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. What do you think, Matt?
I mean, same thing. And I think this is something we've talked about quite a bit for a while, is that you get a story. I don't know what the story is, but we know what the story is that McKinsey just told us. And then the funds who've been excessively long all this time, you ran this cattle market to all-time highs, backed off a little, and then of course they could puke, and you could take quite a bit out of this market. It doesn't mean it's a bearish fundamental situation over the long haul. You've still got bullish fundamentals, but if they decide they're going to liquidate longs, it's going to get pretty ugly. So just having some protection, I think, has been absolutely advisable here over the last couple 3 weeks.
Yeah, this kind of volatility is just going to be par for the course when you're at such lofty levels. Outside markets are pretty quiet this morning. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Matt, thanks for joining us. We will be back on Monday.